Taking an extended sabbatical from college was a decision I made to escape the relentless academic grind that had been weighing me down. Becoming a flight attendant had always been a childhood dream, and it felt like the perfect opportunity to explore a different path. However, what I experienced during one overnight stay in my home state of Austin, Texas, would haunt me for the rest of my life. Austin was a city I held close to my heart. Not only was it my hometown, but it was also where my younger brother, Mark, and my father still lived. The thought of spending time with my family, after months away from home, filled me with joy, and I eagerly anticipated our reunion. Our flight to Austin went smoothly, and upon landing, my fellow crew members and I checked into a reputable hotel near the airport. I was exhausted but thrilled about the prospect of seeing my family again. I dropped off my bags in my hotel room and decided to freshen up before heading out to meet them. However, what happened next would shatter the peace and anticipation I had felt. As I was about to step into the shower, an abrupt and loud knock echoed through my hotel room. Startled, I wrapped a towel around myself and made my way to the door. A deep, raspy voice on the other side claimed to be a maintenance worker sent by the front desk to fix a plumbing issue in my bathroom. I hesitated. I hadn't reported any issues with my room, and the timing of this supposed repair seemed odd. A sinking feeling of suspicion clawed at me, but I decided to exercise caution. I didn't call for any maintenance. I called out, keeping my hand on the doorknob, but not opening it. The voice on the other side grew more insistent and menacing, making my heart race. "Ma'am, we've had a report of a leak in your bathroom. We need to check it immediately." Unease settled in the pit of my stomach, and I knew I couldn't ignore my instincts. I refused to open the door and instead peered through the peephole. What I saw sent chills down my spine. A large, imposing man loomed outside my door. He looked disheveled and had a sinister glint in his eyes. Fear coursed through me as I realized that I was in grave danger. I backed away from the door and reached for my phone, dialing the front desk's number. The voice on the other end sounded professional and friendly as they answered my call. "Hello. This is the front desk. How can we assist you today?" My heart pounding. I explained the situation. "There's a man at my door claiming to be maintenance, but I didn't request any maintenance, and I'm really uncomfortable. Can you please send someone to check?" The hotel employee's response sent a shiver down my spine. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but we haven't dispatched anyone to your room. Please stay inside, and I'll send security up immediately." I hung up, my hands trembling. I knew I had to stay safe, so I retreated into the bathroom, locking the door behind me, and then hid in the shower, my breaths shallow with fear. Outside my room, the menacing stranger continued to pound on the door, demanding entry. His threats grew more aggressive and unhinged, and I could hear his heavy breathing and guttural mutterings, making my skin crawl. It felt like an eternity, but eventually, the reassuring sound of footsteps approached my door. Security officers from the hotel had arrived on my floor, and I could hear them confronting the man outside my room. A heated exchange ensued, and the stranger's aggression escalated. I realized that my life was hanging by a thread. I needed to take further action to ensure my safety. With trembling hands, I dialed 911 and whispered my location to the emergency operator, explaining the dire situation. Moments later, the wailing sirens of approaching police cars pierced the night. The stranger's demeanor shifted as he heard the approaching sirens, and he attempted to flee. However, the security officers managed to detain him just as he reached the stairwell. When the police arrived, they arrested the intruder for trespassing, attempted break-in, and a host of other charges. I watched from the safety of my bathroom as they led him away in handcuffs, his eyes filled with malevolence. After providing my statement to the police and hotel security, I finally emerged from my bathroom feeling a strange mix of relief and dread. I had narrowly escaped a potentially life-threatening situation, and the realization of just how close I had come to danger was overwhelming. The hotel staff and the police revealed that the man had a history of break-ins and violent assaults, making it clear that I had been specifically targeted as his next victim. As terrifying as it was to contemplate, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had narrowly escaped becoming another statistic. The remainder of my stay at the hotel was a tense and unsettling experience. I couldn't shake off the feeling of being watched, and every creaking floorboard or distant noise sent shivers down my spine. I was grateful for the constant presence of hotel security, but I couldn't truly relax until I left the hotel and reunited with my family the next day. When I finally met up with my brother Mark and my father, I shared the horrifying experience I had endured. They were shaken to their cores, realizing just how close they had come to losing me forever. They hugged me tightly, their relief palpable. As we sat down for dinner at a cozy Austin restaurant, I couldn't help but reflect on the fragility of life. I had narrowly escaped a nightmarish encounter, and it had left me with a newfound appreciation for the safety and comfort of my family's presence. I knew that I would carry the memory of that fateful night with me for the rest of my life, a chilling reminder of the darkness that could lurk just beyond the surface of the familiar and mundane. I was just a child when my family embarked on a cross-country adventure, exploring every nook and cranny of the United States. My parents were free spirits, always seeking new experiences and uncharted territories. We traveled from the bustling streets of New York City to the serene beaches of Hawaii, and from the rugged wilderness of Alaska to the sweltering deserts of Arizona. Every state held a unique charm, and we made memories that would last a lifetime. But amidst the joyous escapades, there was one memory that haunted me. A nightmarish hotel stay that would forever be etched into my soul. It was the summer of 1992 when we found ourselves in the heart of the Midwest, in a small town that time seemed to have forgotten. Our journey had led us to a quaint, aging hotel that boasted the charm of a bygone era. It stood out amongst the many places we had stayed, not for its opulence, but for the feeling of desolation that hung in the air like an unshakable curse. Prior to this fateful night, my family was the picture of happiness. My parents, John and Emily, shared a love that was palpable, and I was the fortunate product of their affection. Yet, as soon as we crossed the threshold of that eerie hotel, the mood in our family shifted inexplicably. Arguments, rare in our otherwise harmonious household, erupted like a tempest between my parents. Their voices echoed down the dimly lit corridors, filling the air with tension. But it wasn't just their arguments that disturbed me. As I roamed the hallways in search of solace, I began to notice peculiar things, whispers that seemed to emanate from the very walls themselves, predicting doom when night fell. Everyone in this place will die tonight. They hissed in chilling unison. I shivered, but my fears remained unspoken. I couldn't bear to see my parents in such turmoil, and I made several futile attempts to reason with my father. I begged him to leave this place, to find somewhere else to stay, but he brushed aside my concerns with an unsettling determination, insisting that this was the best hotel we had ever come across. His refusal to leave filled me with a growing sense of dread. Desperate, I turned to my mother, but she was distant, as if trapped in a waking nightmare. She barely acknowledged my words and retreated into the recesses of her mind, her eyes vacant and haunted. Unable to find solace within my own family, I sought help from the hotel worker, an elderly man who seemed perpetually lost in thought. When I implored him to intervene, His gaze met mine with a forlorn sadness. "I'm afraid there's nothing I can do," he muttered, as if carrying the weight of centuries of sorrow. The hours ticked away ominously, and as night descended, the hotel's eerie atmosphere intensified. My unease grew as I heard pounding on my parents' room door. It was as though a malevolent force was trying to claw its way inside. My father, now agitated beyond reason, unbolted the door, allowing whatever horror awaited to enter. I stood, frozen in the dimly lit hallway, my heart pounding in my chest. A man, or perhaps something less than a man, slipped through the threshold. He was a shadowy figure, dressed in a long black trench coat, a wide-brimmed hat that concealed his face, and polished black boots that clicked ominously with each step. My father's voice, quivering with fear, echoed through the corridor. "Who are you? What do you want?" he demanded. The mysterious intruder remained silent, his presence a malevolent force that seemed to drain the very life from the room. I watched in helpless horror as he approached my parents, who stood frozen and powerless. Then, as if in a cruel parody of salvation, the room erupted in screams that chilled my very soul. I rushed forward, but the invisible barrier of dread held me back. I could only watch as my parents' faces twisted in agony, their bodies racked with torment. When the room finally fell silent, I was left standing outside in the darkness, tears streaming down my face. I had lost my parents, and I had lost them to something beyond human comprehension. The police arrived, their expressions a blend of sympathy and indifference. They listened to my harrowing account of the night's events, but I could see in their eyes that they had already reached their conclusions. They believed my father had killed my mother in a fit of rage before taking his own life, and nothing I said could change their minds. I was thrust into a world I was prepared for, spending the remainder of my teenage years in a foster home. The memories of that night haunted me, tormenting my dreams and shrouding my every waking moment in darkness. Over 20 years have passed since that fateful night, and I now stand on the precipice of middle age. I have built a new life, married with 2 children of my own. Yet the scars of that night still linger, hidden beneath the facade of normalcy. I have never returned to that small town, nor have I set foot in the accursed hotel, where my family was torn asunder. It was only recently that I learned the true extent of the horrors that had plagued that place. The hotel had earned a chilling nickname, Suicide Hotel, due to the 50 people who had taken their own lives within its walls in the 1990s. It sent shivers down my spine, for I knew that my family had narrowly escaped a fate worse than death. I often find myself wondering what might have happened if I had chosen to stay in my parents' room that night instead of my own. Would I have met the same tragic end, or would I have been spared the horrors that befell them? The questions torment me, but I am grateful for the life I have now. But there are nights when I wake in a cold sweat, the memory of that ominous figure in the black hat and trench coat haunting my dreams, and I can't help but wonder if he is still out there, lurking in the shadows, waiting for another unsuspecting family to stumble upon the cursed hotel and fall victim to his malevolent presence. This happened to me 2 years ago, during a family vacation. My brother and I had embarked on a road trip, and after hours of driving, we finally checked into an old and rather eerie hotel. The place had an unsettling charm, with its creaking wooden floors and dimly lit hallways. My brother and I were given a room with 2 twin beds, and as we settled in, I couldn't help but feel a sense of unease about the place. I brushed off the feeling as simple exhaustion from the long drive and hoped that a good night's sleep would ease my nerves. The first night in that hotel would be etched into my memory forever. I had drifted into a restless sleep when the nightmare began. In it, I found myself in a room eerily similar to the one we were staying in. I could smell a strange, pungent scent that made my stomach churn. The room was bathed in an otherworldly dim light, and that's when I saw her, a horrifying old woman with wrinkled, mottled skin and long, tangled gray hair. My heart pounded as the old woman drew closer to my bed. Her piercing eyes seemed to bore into my soul, and a scream started to build up within her chest. It was a bone, chilling, otherworldly scream that seemed to echo through the very depths of my nightmares. I tried to wake up, to escape the horrifying vision, but I was trapped within the dream's cruel grip. The old woman's terrifying shriek grew louder, and I felt as if it would shatter my eardrums. I gasped for air, my heart racing, until finally I jolted awake in the hotel room, bathed in cold sweat and gasping for breath. For a moment, I couldn't tell if the nightmare was real or not. My brother, who had been sound asleep in the adjacent bed, stirred awake, alarmed by my frantic breathing. I couldn't bring myself to explain the nightmare, afraid that I would sound crazy. Instead, I assured him it was just a bad dream and tried to calm myself down. But as the night wore on, I couldn't shake off the overwhelming sense of dread that had settled upon me. I couldn't close my eyes, fearing that the nightmare would return to claim me once more. My brother, after reassuring me that it was just a nightmare, fell back asleep. Meanwhile, I stayed wide awake, staring into the darkness, and the strange scent from the dream seemed to linger in the room. As hours turned into dawn, I was still unable to shake off the unsettling feeling that had gripped me. This was not just a nightmare. It felt too real, too vivid. The image of the old woman's horrifying face and her piercing scream haunted me. The following night, I was determined not to sleep. I couldn't bear the thought of going through that nightmare again. I sat on the edge of my bed, my eyes fixed on the dimly lit room. The strange scent lingered, and my nerves were on edge. Hours passed, and my brother's soft snores filled the room. I was alone in my torment, wondering if I was losing my mind. The night seemed endless, and I kept glancing at the clock, watching the minutes tick by. I was determined to stay awake until morning, no matter how exhausted I became. As the clock neared the time of the nightmare from the previous night, I braced myself for the worst. The room was shrouded in darkness, and the scent in the air grew stronger. My heart raced, and my breath quickened. But this time, I was determined not to succumb to the dream's grasp. Suddenly, I heard a faint whisper, like the rustling of leaves on a cold, windy night. It was the same eerie whisper that had haunted my nightmare. My pulse quickened, and I strained to listen. The whisper grew louder, and I realized it was the old woman's voice, the same voice that had screamed in my dream. I couldn't see her, but I felt her presence in the room, drawing closer. The scent became overwhelming, suffocating me. I clenched my eyes shut, trying to block out the terror, and covered my ears to muffle the nightmarish scream. My heart pounded in my chest as I fought to stay awake. Hours passed, and eventually, the whisper faded, and the scent dissipated. The night had passed, and the nightmare had not returned. But I was left shaken, wondering if the old woman had been real, if the nightmare had somehow crossed over into the waking world. The next morning, my brother and I left the hotel, and I couldn't shake the feeling of unease that had settled over me. I still couldn't be sure if the nightmare had been real, or just a product of exhaustion and a vivid imagination. I desperately hoped that it had been nothing more than a dream, a terrible trick of my mind. 2 years have passed since that fateful night, but the memory still haunts me. I've never experienced a nightmare like that before or since. I still wonder if the old woman was real or just a creation of my tortured mind. But one thing is certain. I will never forget the horrifying scream that echoed in the depths of my nightmares, and the strange scent that lingered long after the night had passed.